joined now by our Tuesday regular from the Province and Post Media, Mr. Patrick Johnston, on the eve of Young Stars. How are you doing, my friend? Hope all is well.
Yeah, well, very well. Nice to see the gang getting back. I think as we were chuckling before we went on air, there's the video of Quinn Hughes looking like the kid on the school tour and just kind of, I guess we're going around here. So, no, it's just nice to see all the faces. It's nice to see all the faces. Hands in his
pockets. Could not be more laid back.
Yeah.
But good to see him in town. I know he's going to do part of the NHL media tour for the Canucks this year.
Yeah, and Elias Pettersson's here now, too.
So starting to feel like we've got a full boat. Of course, before we get into training camp, we get into Young Stars. More on that in a second. But let's start with the Bodog poll question for you, my friend. Which Canucks prospect are you most excited about? Is it their first-round pick, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, who will not play at Young Stars, his Djurgården season already underway over in Sweden? Is it Danila Klimovich, who will play in the Young Stars tournament following his rookie season with the Abbotsford Canucks? Or is it Jack Rathbone, who, as we all know, is most likely to play NHL games amongst the three? Or feel free to go off the board if there are players worth going off the board for, Patrick.
I think we're gonna go with Rathbone, just because he's right in front of us, and I want to see if he have a chance with this new group, new management, new coach, to see how that all shakes out. Because a guy that we know this team needs to have some success with, because there has been so few defense prospects coming through, and had the start at the beginning of the year, but it was an under fire Travis Green, who was overthinking everything and really had become incredibly risk averse. And as a result, Rathbone was there for 9 games, but it didn't make any kind of impact. Certainly, I needed, I think, quite clearly get more just game time in the AHL, and made the best of it, I think, once he got himself healed up. So looking forward to see what he can do. I mean, in the end, people need to calm down. He's not going to be the second coming of Quinn Hughes. But a player who, if he hits, will help this team get a long way towards where they need to be.
And sooner than the others. And, I think there's some upward mobility for Rathbone. I voted Rathbone as well.
I mean, at the NHL level, that's the right answer. Just in terms of overall storylines go, guys, I am curious about Danila Klimovich because, 18 points in 60 games, so a third of a point per game almost for him. As an 18-year-old playing against men, and he jumped like 3 rungs on the ladder, really, going to the American League this year. I'm curious to see if he had great learnings and how much of a jump he can make this year. Again, I don't expect him to be the next coming to Brendan Shanahan either, but I think there's a possibility this kid actually does make a big AHL jump this year.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, fairly or not, probably always going to be compared with Logan Stankoven, who, of course, was on the table there. Yeah. I mean, the Canucks weren't the only team to pass on Stankoven, to be clear, but certainly there was a lot of feeling there that was the guy they really should have gone for. Klimovich has a lot of raw talent and showed well in a tournament no one expected him to show well at. Now, of course, the lesson there was that's also, I suppose, some of the Yul Levy story. But in the end, here's here. And as you said, he came from a nowhere league in Belarus, and probably if he'd been following just each step, would have played in the queue last year. But in the end, the Canucks chose to keep him here because they could work with him. I think maybe having a little bit of not sure how Major Junior was going to play out, given how the year before had played out. He needs to show some progress. I mean, certainly he's going to have to look, the two-way game is what they all talk about every player, and he's got to figure that out and really needs to take a big step up this year because he's had all summer. He's been here all summer. Everybody, seems like a good high character guy, seems to have a sense of how hard he's going to have to keep working if he's going to have a chance to make it. But certainly needs to make an impact, even if, he is still going to be a year or two younger than most of his peers.
And here's the thing, fellas, I'm not going to fixate on production this year for Klimovich at the AHL level because he's still awfully young. For the league. So it's going to be less about that and more just about how much is he playing? Is he playing in tight games in the third period? Obviously you don't want a scenario where he's healthy scratched again. in the playoffs. And at the end of the day, I've thought a lot about this, and particularly after our conversation with Ryan Johnson for President's Week, Blake. I think they made the right call with Klimovich just because so emotionally erratic, right? Like misses a chance or, gets down on himself and goes out and takes a stupid penalty. Like some of the stories that Ryan Johnson, has talked about here over this first year, we're talking about a guy who needs a lot of growing up.
But
Maturation.
Ryan Johnson said he'd come a long way in that.
And has come a long way. But what I'm saying is, I'm not sure he comes a long way if he's outsourced to a Quebec team on the highways of La Belle Province, getting away with probably more than what he got away with in Abbotsford. Yes, exactly, because the production would be there and because you don't have the direct supervision of your professional team. At all times. So
now, Klimovich will be at Young Prospects as we see the roster is unveiled by the Vancouver Canucks, Patrick. And Matt has been so down on the rosters at the Penticton event, saying there's no prospects there.
No. It is not the most. Okay, so let me ask you this.
There's no Connor McDavid. You're right.
Let me ask you this. I know I'm putting you both on the spot. How many guys on the Canucks roster play an NHL game in their career? I think Artur Silovs will probably get in one at some point, right?
I'm pretty sure Omen will get a game this year.
Yeah. He was next on my list, and Carlson, I think, probably as well.
Yeah. I know they like Tristan Nielsen a lot, but he's, him and Chase Wouters are sort of pairs in peas in a pod in terms of they're one of 1,000 guys. You get someone else was pointing to me, you get, sort of there's 50 really great players in the NHL, and then there's like 1,000 guys that can do the rest. And, 400 of them or 500 of them are in the NHL, or sorry, I guess. 700 of them are in the NHL at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you got a handful, you got 300-400 guys that are kind of on the bubble and, they're fighting to get into that group. So yeah, realistically 2 or 3. I don't really think any of these defensemen were going to, Kudratsev obviously is the draft pick from this year and an interesting player for sure, but we'll see.
I'm going to say 4. I'm going to one up. Yeah. I'm going to say Silovs, Aman, Klimovich,
and Carlson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. And this year, maybe Carlson, Aman, or Silovs, but that probably means something has gone poorly. All right, let's move on. I see you penned on Bo Horvat after his comments yesterday. Quite a headline there, too. At the props. Bo Horvat, I'm a Canuck right now. Canuck captain spoke with the media Monday morning, said all the right things, though he hinted he knows the future may lead elsewhere. ... Ellipses, Patrick.
Well, it was something he got asked about, sort of the idea of not having his contract done, everyone thinking he'd be the first one and him not having that. And if he had any thoughts on that, he was very careful and very professional. And certainly didn't express any frustration. Was very clear this is where he wants to be. But you still sit there and think about, the reality of it all. And we've talked about this, you sign Miller. There's not a lot of space left. And I noticed in the story, I didn't hype it up too much because in the end, like I said, you couldn't really get a sense of really how he's feeling. But you still look at the situation and as it stands at this point, he is the third center, assuming Elias Pettersson is still lined up as a center separately from JT Miller. And can the Canucks really afford having all 3 guys? It's just hard to see. And he's a player that has, a strong reputation around the league. He's a guy that gets you that goal when you need that goal. Like he has really become that kind of player in the last couple of years, an outstanding leader, a quality person. But the salary cap forces you to make decisions. And I think in the back of everyone's mind, and it was put to him, he said, you recognize, I think it was JPAT that put that to him. He said, in the market like this, people are going to talk about it. And he basically is like, I got to push that out of my mind. He would like to re-sign here, but I think, there's no sense of a deadline. He's put full faith in his agents. but you still sit back and, I go back to my first reaction when I saw the Miller. I mean, I guess it was my second reaction after they got it done on Miller, was what happens to Bo Horvat now, because in the end it felt like a choice. And so you find yourself wondering where this is going to go.
It's
I want to ask him the winger question, but if you want to follow up on this.
Do you get the feeling that they have the same level of warm and fuzzies about the captain that they have in the past? It's a new management group, and Canadian captains have always been just so revered. I mean, we were trying to cram our brains yesterday about when the last time a Canuck captain was traded, because ultimately Linton wasn't captain when he was traded.
Right.
Neither was Luongo.
Right.
I mean, they usually have bubble wrap and a force field around them.
Right.
Does Bo Horvat still have that on this team? He's loved, but is he loved to that degree still, like he normally has been?
Was Dan Quinn one of the tri-captains when he was traded? Is it 30-some years ago?
That's not a standalone, though. Yeah.
I'm just sitting here trying to think of captains of Canadian teams, periods,
it just
traded.
It just doesn't happen very often. It is a question. I mean, I go back again, and I've noted this when we talked to Patrick Allvin last week. When he, essentially was asked about JT Miller's qualities as a leader, and, the observation that the GM has made about the sort of get it done spirit and the ability to find that sort of extra capacity that maybe you didn't even know was there, and that forever is a secret to the success of any top player, and is realizing, oh wow, I had way more to give, and I'm glad I found it. And that's, in many ways, that's a story that Horvat has talked about himself. Was, he had an early lesson in seeing the Sedins, and that idea of they always had to be first. They knew they had to be first. They had to be first. And that being an ethos, he thinks that he and all players should understand that you should be pushing to do that as well. It's not just I'm as fit as I can be. It's I'm going to be first. And, that is to his credit. I think that's always been his spirit and his style, but nonetheless, the observation from management has been that is something that needs to be beyond just him or whoever else, and that they really like the way that Miller leads, tries to be a leader. And I've talked about it in the past, and Miller and I we talked about it on last week again, that he is conscious of the fact that he knows he's got instinct towards speaking loudly and proudly and strongly, and at times he has to be maybe a bit more careful with how he uses that power. It's just the leadership styles and the contrasts are there. I mean, Horvat is a guy who says he's not a raw guy. He believes in leading by example more than anything. And so you do find yourself pondering that comparison, how you stand those two up next to each other and see the difference in how they self-identify themselves as leaders, and how the management feels about that and what they've said about it. And I think their inclination has been towards sort of the Miller instinct. I don't think they're rejecting the Horvat instinct. I do think there's a very healthy way for them to coexist, and they talk about they're good friends. I think that's a thing that they've been trying to highlight, make sure that's clear. And I don't think there's any reason not to think they are, but it still all lingers in there, and you wonder about changing the dynamic of a leadership group that's only made the playoffs once in the last 7 years.
I am stumping for Kuzmenko and Podkolzin, the two Russians, to be Bo's line mates to start the season. I think it's appropriate starting positions for the rookie and the second-year man. But I also think, Kuzmenko is known as a bit of a creator, and Vasily plays that straightforward, crash-the-net style, and I think Bo can mesh well with both of them and create some production. What says you, my friend? Who do you want to see him?
Well, you asked me this question, and I immediately went to Natural Stat Trick to remind myself of who the teammates Horvat had last year that helped drive play the best. And the two wingers that he had the most success with were Nils Höglander and Tanner Pearson. I think Höglander and Horvat are a great pair. I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, a lot of questions on what Höglander can bring this year after dealing with a difficult groin injury, having a mostly disappointing season last year. But clearly players who drive the bus in the right direction. I think Mejia would be a fascinating line mate for him, the way he plays. That's the speed and front line and that finishing ability. You still need to find some kind of creator, though. I mean, Kuzmenko as a creator is a fascinating player. We don't know enough about him necessarily as a two-way player, but the perception of him being a guy that controls play, is a great passer in tight quarters, attacks the puck. Vasily Podkolzin says, at least he looks like Garland. I said, does he play like Garland? And he said, well, I guess we'll find out. But to me, when Horvat is having his most success, it's when he's playing with line mates that are strong two-way players. The perception of Horvat has been, he's a good defensive. He's actually he's not always been a great defensive player. He's not a very good penalty killer. He's a great face-off man. He's, probably the league's best face-off artist, and face-offs have a role to a point. But there's a lot of times, most of the game is not played at face-offs. And we can only talk about, say, Jay Beagle, about how tough non-face-off situations became for a player like him.
Jason Dickinson.
Or Jason Dickinson,
Yes.
Well, anyways, he's the reverse. But yeah, so to me, when he's been at its most successful, it's a player, because Horvat's a good, strong skater. He can move. It's playing players with those kinds of skill sets. And I think Nils Höglander is a great fit for him. I'd love to see Vasily Podkolzin with him, because I think Podkolzin is ready for big breakout. And obviously, he's not not your classic superstar Russian skater, but he's still a very good skater and such a smart player. I think the three of them could be a fascinating trio.
What's a breakout season look like for Vasily Podkolzin in your mind?
20 goals? Is that too much?
No, I don't think so. I think it's. I don't think he's much more than that in his career. I think he's a 25 to 27 goal scorer at the peak, but I think he can get to 20 and 20 sort of thing. I think that's a successful season.
14 goals last year, and not a lot of power play time. So that's always the big story there. But yeah, if you can get, you can repeat the production that he was showing towards the end of the season, and continue to use his ice time effectively. Him getting 20 goals would be absolutely fantastic season for him.
I'll answer it a little counterintuitively. 15 goals and he becomes a trusted penalty killer.
Yeah, it depends on what Bruce thinks of that particular role for him.
Yeah.
There's a confidence issue.
I wouldn't expect it right off the hop, but who knows? As we have discussed, we know it's going to be Miller and Mikheyev. We just don't know who beyond that is going to get the lion's share of the penalty killing duty.
Yeah,
amongst the forwards. But needless to say, you need some centermen in there.
It should be Pettersson and someone. The Pettersson's success last year on the
Lazar as well. I suspect will factor.
Lazar will have some time.
He plays the middle ice. Yeah, marvelous stuff, Patrick. Thank you for this. Will we see you at Young Stars? Are you coming on up?
No, I'm. It's the Coos show at Young Stars. I will be at training.
Oh, okay. We'll party with Coos. We'll tell you all about it. You're going to miss a good
sure
time.
You will.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care,
Patrick
guys.
Johnston on Tuesdays with us. Everybody. And I like that exercise. I'm not crapping on the rosters. I'm just saying.
You just don't like them. Yeah.
No. Quite the contrary. As I said in the opening segment, Winnipeg, Edmonton are bringing some talent to this tournament. It's just, it's disappointing the Canucks have been so poor in the standings. This tournament goes away, it comes back, and the year that it comes back, you're still looking at a lot of hope bet guys. Nothing like, Edmonton, Winnipeg are bringing players to this tournament who will play in the NHL, and in fact will play in the NHL this year, and likely will hold down big roles for their teams in time. And you just don't see that quality with the Canucks, and nor do you even see quantity with the Canucks list. So it's a big project here. As we know, the pipeline is pretty thin. And, granted, yes, no Lekaramaki here at this tournament. So some other guys are missing as well. It's just looking forward to the day when we can talk about a bunch of young players who are on the come and going to play for, cheap entry-level contracts and replace aging and expensive veterans.